foreign agricultural product coming into America, and our farmers starting on April 2nd. It may be a little bit of ultimately more production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers.
Well, if you're wondering why farmers are so concerned about their farm finances right now, they really just can't catch a break. It's not just because corn prices are below break even for most. It's the fact input prices are so high.
Trump's tariffs are hitting U.S. farmers hard, yet some still back them. His trade wars hurt both farmers and taxpayers. In just 6 weeks, $8 billion in U.S. farm export deals have stalled. Meanwhile, America's grain bins are overflowing. Corn stocks just hit 4.64 billion bushels. Soybeans 1.01 billion. A record pile for over a decade. But prices keep sinking. This July, the corn contract broke its all-time low, pushing Midwest cash prices dangerously close to $4 a bushel. The break-even line for many growers. Here's the kicker. While U.S. grain sits unsold, buyers from Tokyo to London are locking in long-term deals with Canadian suppliers, securing shipments well past 2025. If this were just a temporary blip, why tie up supply for years? Tonight, we break down how America's farm export machine collapsed, how Canada is filling the gap, and the bigger question Washington can't spin. Has the world lost trust in U.S. agriculture? That silence from D.C. set the stage for what came next. On June 17, 2025, Trump left the G7's economic talks mid-summit, abandoning an empty U.S. chair and 6 uneasy allies. Canada's PM Mark Carney moved fast, stitching together a safe food corridor from the prairies to Europe and Asia. 2 days later, Brussels hit back. Starting April 15, 2025, the EU slapped a 25% tariff on U.S. corn, adding €2 billion to Europe's annual feed bill and pushing buyers to Canada. The timing couldn't be worse. The EU had just imported 3.4 million tons of U.S. corn since July 2024, the biggest in a decade. That door just slammed shut. Chicago prices slid under $4 for the first time since 2020, a loss for Iowa growers. Meanwhile, Canada is cashing in. Carney's office says new deals made during the summit will ship at least 12 million tons of prairie grain to Japan, Germany, and Italy through 2027, ironclad against tariffs. The damage is clear in Washington's books. USDA now pegs this year's farm trade gap at $49 billion, the biggest ever, flipping from a surplus forecast 3 years ago. Put simply, America's farm belt isn't just losing on price, it's losing trust. Unless the White House rewrites its tariff playbook fast, the world's biggest breadbasket may watch loyal customers swap the stars and stripes for the maple leaf, contract by contract. The dominoes keep falling. Trade flows shifted in weeks. In May 2025, Canadian exports outside the U.S. hit a record high, up 5.7%, even as shipments to the U.S. shrank. Hamburg and Yokohama freight desks now write Canada origin only into contracts to dodge the next White House tweet. London's doing the same. A UK trade brief shows British imports from Canada up 22.8% in 2024. Soybeans leading the surge. That puts Canada ahead of Brazil on Britain's non-EU supplier list for the first time this century. Across the Pacific, Japan bought 261,000 tons of Canadian wheat in March, its biggest March draw since 2018, locking in supply through the Osaka Expo. All this is happening while U.S. elevators groan under record stockpiles and Chicago futures hover below $4. European millers call the tariff a risk premium. Asian buyers say Canada's supply is ironclad against headline shocks. Washington's tariffs were meant to force partners back to the table. Instead, they drove them to Calgary boardrooms and Thunder Bay docks. Unless the White House pivots fast, America's farm belt will keep losing contracts. One tender, one season, one ally at a time. The camera lingers on those overloaded elevators as the numbers worsen. On June 30th, 2025, the USDA's grain stocks report confirmed what the drone shots already showed. Chicago's July corn contract scraped $4.80 a bushel on July 3rd. September fell too. Traders haven't seen prices this low, with stocks this big, since the 2020 trade war slump. Plains cash prices look even worse. Back in April, The Kansas Farm Bureau warned that feed grain basis was running 30 to 80 cents below the 5-year average, squeezing farm cash flow just as loan renewals hit mailboxes. Elevators now stack grain on asphalt. That improvisation isn't cheap. Insurance fees, tarps, fumigation. Every extra dime comes straight off the farmer's check. The liquidity crunch is spreading. Co-op boards in Salina report farmers deferring seed and fertilizer bills, hoping for a harvest rally that may not come. Local banks are quietly watching 5-figure operating loans, something they haven't done since 2019. Farmers want help, but in steel, not subsidies. On June 25th, the Kansas corn growers joined other groups urging tax credits for more silo space, arguing new bins are cheaper than selling below cost. State lawmakers are drafting a fast-track bill, but no one's pouring concrete before winter. Every day the bins stay full, Canada prints new contracts. Tokyo took over 260,000 tons of prairie wheat in March. London soy crushers lifted another cargo off Vancouver for August. Even German feed mills, once loyal to the Gulf Coast, now route half their orders through Thunder Bay. This isn't just a price dip, it's a confidence bleed. As long as U.S. tariffs hang over every load like a trapdoor, buyers will keep paying for peace of mind under a maple leaf. The question isn't who blinks first, it's how many family farms run dry before Washington does anything. Canada and Mexico have quietly redrawn the North American farm map. On May 15th, Prime Minister Mark Carney stood with President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico City, pledging to turbocharge farm trade under the USMCA, prairie grain and beef skipping U.S. rails for Mexican tables. Ottawa backed it with real cash. On March 7th, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland unveiled a $6.5 billion Canadian credit line to help shippers lock in cheap loans, insure cargo, and build cold chain hubs from Veracruz to Valparaiso. She called it a safety net for exporters chasing markets America can't guarantee. The money's already moving steel. Swiss giant Kuna plus Nagel told Reuters on March 18th it's opening a 150-door cross-dock in Laredo, Texas, because Canada, Mexico freight is jamming lanes built for U.S. grain. Tariffs have turned routine checks into 2-day logjams, and buyers can't risk warm soy meal. Every delay hands Ottawa another sale. Since April, Mexican mills have rerouted over 600,000 tons of corn from the Gulf Coast to Canadian rail, linking Saskatchewan to Prince Rupert. Wheat is following. Vancouver's shipping slots are now booked solid through February 2026. The optics are brutal for Washington. The USMCA was meant to deepen integration under American leadership. Instead, tariff chaos flipped the script. Canada supplies, Mexico refines, and the U.S. watches prairie grain roll past idle Iowa elevators. Carney calls it the Maple Cactus Alliance. Mexico calls it insurance. Either way, the numbers say it's working. Canada's farm exports to Mexico rose 14% in the first 5 months of 2025, while U.S. shipments dropped 9%. If that gap grows, America won't just lose market share. It'll lose supply chain trust that took a century to build. With G7 buyers drifting to Canada, the next 6 months come down to one choice. Does Washington blink or double down? If the White House takes Brussels' August offer for a 10% universal tariff cap, the EU will drop its 25% levy on U.S. corn, a tariff squeezing Europe's farm margins and stirring pushback from feed mills to parliaments. A deal could lift futures and shrink Canada's cost edge, but Japan and Mexico would want the same break, triggering another political fight at home. Hold the line, and the glut grows. USDA models show 2025 harvest stocks could top 5.8 billion bushels, the biggest since 2020. That overhang is dragging cash bids deeper below break-even and pushing more Midwest farms toward workouts. Ottawa's ready. Its $6.5 billion credit plan backs cheap loans and cold chain hubs to Veracruz, shielding prairie grain from any price war. If tariffs spread to fertilizer and machinery, IMF research shows 45% of a fertilizer shock hits global grain prices within a year, turning today's surplus into tomorrow's food spike. Every headline from Washington now nudges the dial. Harvests 8 weeks out. The clock's louder than the politics. $9 billion in export dollars gone in 6 weeks. 5 G7 partners now fly a maple leaf on deals that once showed the stars and stripes. The Farm Belt sitting on its biggest pile since the trade war, but buyers line up in Vancouver, not New Orleans. Canada's winning by doing the simplest thing, delivering on time. If Washington can't rebuild trust fast, the question won't be who buys U.S. corn, but how many Midwest acres stay idle. From here, the story splits. The White House cuts tariffs and wins buyers back, or doubles down and watches prairie railcars scoop up what's left. Either way, North America's food chain is being rewritten. So what breaks first? DC politics or Farm Belt patience? This was just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up. Digital Garage has so much more in store.